The afternoon my daughter-in-law walked into my home with a silver-tongued estate lawyer. She genuinely believed she was about to erase my independence with a single stroke of a pen. She expected me to crumble, to weep softly into a tissue, and to hand over the keys to my life out of sheer intimidation. What Chloe did not know was that I had spent the last 2 months quietly investigating her every move, building an airtight case against her greed. Before we get into exactly how I dismantled her entire plan, I want to ask you all a quick favor. Please let me know in the comments what city or country you are listening from today. It is always fascinating to see where this community reaches, and it really helps the channel grow. Now, let me tell you about the biggest mistake my daughter-in-law ever made. My name is Helen. I am 62 years old, and for 32 years I worked as a senior fraud investigator for the state prosecutor's office.
My entire career was built on tracing hidden assets, reading micro-expressions, and silently observing people who thought they were smarter than everyone else in the room. When I retired, I thought my days of building dossiers were over. My late husband Thomas and I had poured our life savings into purchasing and restoring a massive historic factory loft in the Arts District of Chicago. It was our sanctuary, filled with exposed brick, soaring 20-foot ceilings, and walls lined with the antique books Thomas collected. After he passed away from a sudden heart attack 4 years ago, the loft became my quiet refuge. I maintained it meticulously. The peace lasted until my son David married Chloe. Chloe was a 28-year-old aspiring lifestyle influencer whose entire existence was curated for an audience of strangers on the internet. She spoke in buzzwords, constantly talked about her personal brand, and possessed an exhausting passive-aggressive energy.
David, who had always been a quiet and compliant boy, simply faded into her shadow. From the moment they returned from their honeymoon, Chloe looked at my home not as her mother-in-law's sanctuary, but as unexploited real estate. The true erosion of my boundaries began on a humid Tuesday morning. I had just returned from my morning walk by the lake. When I stepped out of the freight elevator and into my private foyer, I heard the distinct sound of heavy boots scraping against the original hardwood floors. I walked into the main living area to find 3 men in matching gray moving shirts, physically lifting Thomas's heavy oak writing desk. Chloe was standing in the center of the room, holding an iced matcha latte, pointing toward the service elevator. I stopped in the doorway, my investigator's instincts flaring to life. I did not scream. I did not demand answers in a panic. I observed. I noted the logo on the movers' shirts. I noted the ring light set up near the large arched windows. Chloe turned and saw me, offering a painfully bright, hollow smile. "Helen, perfect timing," she chirped, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I am doing a massive brand partnership photo shoot tomorrow, and this space has the absolute perfect rustic chic aesthetic. But your husband's old desk is just entirely too clunky for the minimalist vibe my sponsors want. I am having the guys move it down to the basement storage for a few days." She did not ask. She informed me. She was standing in the home I owned, directing strangers to dismantle the space where my husband had spent the last years of his life. I took a slow, deep breath, maintaining a perfectly neutral facial expression. I walked over to the lead mover, a burly man who looked suddenly very uncomfortable. "Put the desk exactly where you found it, please," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying the unmistakable weight of authority I had honed over decades of interrogating white-collar criminals.
Chloe scoffed, stepping forward. "Helen, do not be difficult. It is just for a few days. You barely even use this room anyway, and you know David and I live in a tiny apartment. It is only fair that we utilize this massive space. It is basically family property." I turned my gaze entirely on her. "Chloe, this is not a studio lot. This is my private residence. You do not have permission to bring commercial crews into my home, and you certainly do not have permission to touch Thomas's belongings. Gentlemen, I will not ask you again. Put the desk down, and then please show yourselves out." The movers quickly placed the heavy oak back onto the rug, nodded apologies, and practically fled toward the elevator. Chloe stood there, her jaw tight, her knuckles white around her plastic cup. "You are being incredibly selfish, Helen," she muttered, refusing to look me in the eye. "David told me you would be difficult about sharing, but I thought you would want to support my career." I did not argue with her. I simply walked over to the front door, opened it, and waited for her to leave. She stormed out, but the air in the loft felt permanently altered. That incident was the catalyst. It was the moment I realized Chloe did not view me as a person. She viewed me as an obstacle, sitting on top of resources she believed were rightfully hers. The next phase of her campaign was financial. Years ago, when David was in college, I opened a secondary credit card on my account for him to use strictly for medical emergencies or vehicle repairs. I had never bothered to close it. 2 weeks after the desk incident, I was sitting at my kitchen island reviewing my monthly statements when I noticed a highly unusual pending charge. $3,800 at a boutique interior design firm in New York. I pulled up the transaction details. It was charged to the secondary card. I picked up my phone and called my bank. I did not file a fraud dispute because I knew exactly who had the card. I simply asked the representative to permanently cancel the secondary card, deactivate the physical chip, and remove David's name from the account entirely. I then poured myself a fresh cup of dark roast coffee and waited. 3 hours later, my phone vibrated. It was Chloe. I answered and placed the phone on the granite counter on speaker. "Helen, is there something wrong with the family account?" she demanded immediately. There was no greeting. I could hear the ambient noise of a high-end retail store in the background. "There is no family account, Chloe," I replied calmly, watching a pigeon land on my windowsill. "There is my personal account, and it is functioning perfectly." "Well, David's emergency card keeps declining," she snapped, her voice rising in pitch. "I am at the checkout for the artisan lighting fixtures we need for the apartment, and the machine keeps saying the account is closed."
"Did you forget to pay the bill? Call the bank right now and authorize this. I have a line of people behind me." I took a slow sip of my coffee. The bill is paid in full. I closed the account this morning. I saw the charge for the New York design firm. An emergency card is for flat tires and hospital visits, Chloe. It is not funding for your interior decorating projects. Helen, you are humiliating me, she hissed into the receiver. We are family. David is your son. You have more money than you could ever spend, and you are acting like a miser. You have to turn it back on. I do not have to do anything, I said, my voice entirely devoid of emotion. Put the fixtures back, Chloe. Have a pleasant afternoon. I ended the call. I knew she would immediately call David to play the victim, twisting the narrative to make it seem as though I was financially abusing them. And I was right. That same Sunday, they were scheduled to come over for our usual bi-weekly dinner. Traditionally, I spent the entire afternoon roasting a chicken, preparing sides, and ensuring the loft smelled like a home. Chloe usually arrived, complained about the carbohydrates, picked at a salad, and left me with a sink full of grease and dishes. This Sunday, I decided the tradition was over. I spent the afternoon reading a novel. At 6 o'clock, I made myself a simple plate of grilled salmon and steamed asparagus. I ate at the kitchen island, washed my single plate, and sat down in the living room with a cup of tea. At exactly 6:30, the elevator doors opened. David and Chloe walked in. Chloe was already scanning the room, her nose wrinkled. "It does not smell like food," Chloe observed, dropping her expensive handbag onto my clean entryway table. "Where is dinner, Helen? We are starving." I did not look up from my book. I already ate. David looked confused, stepping further into the room. "Mom, what do you mean you already ate? It is Sunday dinner. What are we supposed to eat?" I gently placed a bookmark between the pages and closed the hardback cover. "You are both grown adults with incomes. You are free to order a delivery service, or you can walk down to the bistro on the corner. I am no longer operating a free catering service for people who steal from my bank accounts." Chloe crossed her arms, her face flushing a deep, angry red. "This is about the card, isn't it? You are punishing us because I made a simple mistake with the accounts. You are being completely irrational, Helen. This isolation, this hostility, it is not normal behavior." I looked straight at her. Cutting off unauthorized access to my finances is not hostility, Chloe. It is basic asset protection. Now, if you want to order food, you may eat at the table. If not, the elevator is right behind you. They chose to leave, David muttering apologies, while Chloe dragged him out by the arm. But her words echoed in my mind. She had called my behavior irrational. She had called it abnormal. My professional alarm bells began ringing violently. I had investigated enough elder fraud cases to know exactly what those specific words meant. She was laying the groundwork to challenge my mental competency. She was trying to build a narrative that I was a lonely, confused widow who was losing her grip on reality and needed her younger, capable relatives to step in and manage her estate. The confirmation came the following Thursday. They arrived at the loft unannounced. This time, Chloe's entire demeanor had changed. The anger was gone, replaced by a sickeningly sweet, exaggerated concern. She sat on the sofa opposite me, leaning forward with her hands clasped, adopting a tone of voice one might use to soothe a frightened dog. "Helen, David and I have been doing a lot of talking," she began, looking at me with wide, pitiful eyes. "We are really worried about you. You have been so agitated lately, canceling cards, refusing to cook, talking about asset protection. It is like you are becoming paranoid." David nodded, staring at his shoes. "Yeah, Mom." "You just do not seem like yourself. This place is massive, and we think the isolation is affecting your mind." "We spoke to a specialist," Chloe smoothly interjected. "We really think it is time to look into a smaller, managed care community for you, somewhere with professionals who can make sure you are safe. And David and I can take over the management of the loft and the finances. It will take all this stressful burden off your shoulders. We just want to protect you, Helen." I sat perfectly still. I did not react. I did not defend my sanity. I did not raise my voice to tell them they were transparent and pathetic. I let the silence stretch out in the massive room until the discomfort on David's face became physically apparent. I reached into the drawer of the end table, pulled out a small leather-bound notebook and a fountain pen. I clicked the cap off, wrote down the date, the time, and a verbatim quote of Chloe suggesting a managed care community and taking over my finances. "What are you doing?" Chloe asked, the fake concern dropping for a fraction of a second to reveal genuine nervousness. "I am keeping contemporary notes," I replied, my tone clinical. "In my experience, it is always best to have a written record of conversations involving the transfer of large assets." I finished writing, closed the notebook, and stood up. "I appreciate your input regarding my health. However, my cognitive functions are operating at peak efficiency. I will not be moving, and no one will be managing my accounts. Now, I have emails to return." They left, frustrated and empty-handed. But I knew the escalation was far from over. Chloe was impatient, and impatience breeds reckless legal action. I had to lock down my entire life, and I had to do it immediately. I spent the next 4 weeks moving with the quiet, devastating precision of a seasoned investigator building an inescapable trap. First, I addressed the physical security. They both had keys to the downstairs security door and the private elevator entrance. On a Monday morning, I had a specialized security firm install commercial-grade biometric locks on both access points. My fingerprints were the only ones authorized in the system. There were no physical keyholes to pick. The loft was now a fortress. Second, I secured the money. I met with my estate attorney and my wealth manager. I did not just move my funds. I completely restructured my financial identity. I placed 85% of my liquid assets, my retirement accounts, and Thomas's life insurance payout into an irrevocable trust. I named a fiercely independent corporate trustee to oversee it. The trust was legally instructed to pay me a generous living stipend every month, but the principal was locked away.
I specifically drafted a clause stating that if any family member attempted to challenge my competency to gain access to the funds, they would be permanently disinherited from any future estate distribution. The money was now legally invisible and entirely untouchable. Finally, I dealt with the loft. Chloe wanted the space for her influencer lifestyle. I needed to ensure she could never step foot in it again. The loft was legally divided into 2 massive floors. I lived entirely on the upper floor, leaving the lower floor mostly empty. I contacted a high-end commercial real estate broker. Within 2 weeks, I signed a 5-year, unbreakable commercial lease with an exclusive private art gallery. They took over the entire lower floor. The lease included a severe penalty clause. If any unauthorized person attempted to enter the gallery space or harass the gallery staff, the violator would be subject to immediate police arrest for commercial trespassing, and I, as the landlord, would be liable for massive financial penalties. To prevent this, I signed away my own right to grant access to the lower floor. The property was now commercially encumbered. My trap was fully set, primed, and hidden beneath the surface. I went back to watering my plants and reading my books, waiting for Chloe to make her final, fatal move. It happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The intercom buzzed. It was the downstairs concierge, informing me that my daughter-in-law was here with a guest and was demanding access. I smiled, tapped the button to release the lobby elevator, and waited. When my private doors opened, Chloe strode in, radiating a smug, overwhelming confidence. Beside her was a man in his late 40s, wearing a tailored charcoal suit, carrying a thick leather briefcase. He looked around the loft with the hungry, calculating eyes of an estate lawyer who thought he was about to secure a massive asset for a gullible client. "Helen," Chloe announced, not bothering to remove her wet coat. "This is Mr. Sterling. He is a specialist in family estate preservation." I remained seated in my leather reading chair. I gestured toward the sofa opposite me. "Please, sit. Can I offer you a bottle of water, Mr. Sterling?" "No, thank you, Mrs. Vance," he said, unlatching his briefcase with a sharp click. He pulled out a thick stack of legal documents with colorful "Sign Here" tabs protruding from the edges. "We're here because your family is deeply concerned about your declining ability to manage this massive estate. We have drawn up a comprehensive medical proxy and a durable power of attorney. This will legally transfer administrative control of your finances and this property to David and Chloe." Chloe leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "It is the only way, Helen. If you do not sign this willingly, Mr. Sterling is prepared to file a petition in probate court tomorrow morning to have you declared incompetent. We will freeze everything you own. It will be public, it will be humiliating, and you will lose anyway. Just sign the papers, and we can handle everything quietly." She thought she had me cornered. She thought the threat of a courtroom and a man in a suit would shatter my resolve. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I leaned over, opened the drawer of my end table, and pulled out a single, slim manila folder. "Mr. Sterling," I said, keeping my voice incredibly calm and conversational, I spent 3 decades investigating financial crimes and asset concealment for the state prosecutor. Did your client happen to mention my professional background before you decided to come into my home and threaten me with a frivolous probate petition? The lawyer paused, his hand hovering over the paperwork. He glanced at Chloe, a micro-expression of confusion crossing his features. She did not. I opened my folder and slid a certified bank letter across the coffee table toward him. I highly recommend you review the current status of my estate before you threaten to freeze it. You will find that as of 3 weeks ago, my entire liquid net worth was transferred into a corporate-managed, irrevocable trust. I no longer own those assets, Mr. Sterling. The trust owns them. Therefore, there are no bank accounts for my daughter-in-law to manage, even if she had a power of attorney. You cannot freeze what I do not legally hold. Mr. Sterling picked up the paper, his eyes scanning the legal jargon rapidly. The color began to drain from his face. He recognized the name of the corporate trustee. He knew instantly that the money was entirely locked down in a vault that no probate judge would ever pry open without a federal cause. Chloe looked back and forth between us, panic beginning to fracture her smug expression. What does that mean? What is a trust? Mr. Sterling, what is she talking about? I slid a second document across the table. It was a copy of the commercial lease. Furthermore, I continued, my voice sharp and precise, I no longer control the primary square footage of this property. I have executed a 5-year commercial lease for the entire lower floor to a private corporation. The property is encumbered. If you or your client attempt to claim dominion over this building, you will be interfering with a multi-million-dollar commercial contract. If Chloe attempts to enter the lower floor, the gallery security will have her arrested for criminal trespassing. The lawyer slowly put the papers down. He closed his briefcase with a loud snap. He looked at Chloe, and the professional courtesy was entirely gone from his face, replaced by absolute fury. You told me this woman was a confused widow sitting on millions in unsecured liquid cash and unencumbered real estate, he hissed at Chloe. You told me this would be a simple signature collection. You have completely wasted my time, and you have exposed my firm to a potential harassment lawsuit. Do not ever contact my office again. Mr. Sterling stood up, gave me a curt, respectful nod, and walked straight out to the elevator. He did not look back. Chloe was left sitting alone on my sofa. Her hands were trembling. Her carefully constructed aesthetic of power and control had shattered into a million pieces on my antique rug. She looked at me, tears of pure, frustrated rage welling in her eyes. You planned this, she whispered, her voice shaking. You locked us out. You gave away our inheritance. You are evil, Helen. I looked at her, feeling absolutely nothing but relief. It is not your inheritance, Chloe. It is my money, and it is my home. You tried to use my age as a weapon against me. You thought you could gaslight me into surrendering my independence because you wanted a free backdrop for your photos. You played a very aggressive game,
but you played it against someone who spent her life putting smarter people than you in prison. I stood up and pointed toward the elevator. The biometric scanner will not recognize your fingerprint anymore. Do not come back to this loft. If David wishes to see me, we will meet at a restaurant. Chloe grabbed her bag and ran toward the elevator, sobbing angrily. When the heavy metal doors slid shut behind her, the silence that fell over the loft was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It has been 8 months since that afternoon. David called me a few weeks later, apologizing profusely, claiming he had no idea how far Chloe was willing to go.
We are slowly rebuilding our relationship, but strictly on neutral ground. I have not seen Chloe since, and I intend to keep it that way. The art gallery downstairs is thriving, and the owners occasionally send up expensive bottles of wine to thank me for being such a quiet landlord. I spend my mornings reading by the large arched windows, watching the city move below me. I protected my peace, my home, and my dignity, and I did it without ever having to raise my voice. Thank you all for listening to my story. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments. And please do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories just like this.